Hi there, and welcome to Military Histories, a podcast from York Army Museum. Each week we share an interview from the Royal Dragoon Guards audio archive. This season we will be sharing interviews with veterans of the Korean War. You can find more details about the Royal Dragoon Guards Oral History Project in the show notes. If you want to find out a bit more about our museum, there are links to our website and social media channels in the show notes too. In this week's interview you can hear Mr Harry Knowles describing his army experiences. Harry begins to speak about his time in Korea at around 32 minutes into the interview. Thanks for listening. Future episodes will drop every Friday.
Today's interview takes place at Hege, Belper in Derbyshire with Harry Knowles, who was cap badged to the 5th Royal Inniskilling Dragoon Guards prior to and including service in the Korean War. Today's date is the 19th of March 2014 and it's at Harry's home in Hege. Harry, would you like to start, please?
Yes, I guess it would have been early May in 1950 when I got a letter entitled on His Majesty's Secret Service. I'll rephrase that and say on His Majesty's Service, with an epistle inside requiring me to report to the Primary Induction Centre for the Armed Forces in Great Ducie Street, Manchester. I can't remember the exact date when I went. It would be sometime in May, which is the day I turned 18 years of age, and reported amongst many others to the induction centre, where we went through the usual embarrassing procedure of the medical examination, and we were actually asked what type of service we would like to serve in. They certainly weren't taking any offers for the Navy then. It was just hard to get into for whatever reason, but RAF and Army were wide open to people who were interested. I was then asked which corps or arm of the service would I like to serve in the Army, and I said the Royal Armoured Corps, mainly because I'd seen somebody walking about in my hometown Bolton on leave with a snazzy mail-fish cap badge and the red and yellow shoulder flashes, which I rather fancied. And then I suppose it seemed an awfully long wait until I got the final call-up papers, which required me to present myself at Catterick Camp on the 21st of September 1950. In the interim, I'd contacted a couple of other local guys who were going to be called on the same day. So we arranged to meet at the railway station, and by one way or another, via York and Darlington, we got to I think it was the train station at Richmond, where the boys from the training regiment were waiting for us in trucks and trucked us up to what we eventually found out were the Waitwith lines, the north of Catterick Camp. And we had our first sight of the 66th Training Regiment, RAC, under the auspices then of the 8th Royal Tank Regiment. All the instructors were from that regiment also. I think to soften the blow of leaving home and beauty, the first couple of nights they put us into wooden huts which had almost civilian furniture and curtains at the window. This state of affairs didn't last very long. Within 2 days, we were ushered out of that and met the basic army life head-on, issued with very rough sets of denims, shapeless beret, and I think that was all for the first 2 or 3 days. We were then split up into various squads, one of them being for potential officers. We were all in the same, we were in brick huts by then, very army style. very stark, with a stove for which you were never supposed to light in the middle. The potential officers were nearly all public school boys, a complete race apart from us plebeians. And I think one of them, to our horror, instead of getting up for the ablutions in the he brought an electric shaver and shaved in bed. Luckily, he was never caught by the drill sergeant. By this time, we'd been introduced to our drill sergeant, who turned out to be an absolutely first-class chap by the name of Sergeant Worrell, World War II veteran, chest full of medal ribbons, and his sidekick, an Irish corporal, I can't remember his name, his assistant. He introduced himself and said he was going to put us through hell for the next 6 weeks, and we'd better all be on our toes. And divided us, and we were then divided up into squads under various drill sergeants. It was my good fortune to be chosen for Sergeant Worrell's squad, which was named Coriano Squad, which I think was the name of an action that the 8th RTR had fought during the Italian campaign. Then began our initial 6 weeks training, where we were really hounded from breakfast time till it was time to go to bed, getting our kit up to scratch, learning how to bull our boots properly, learning how to do our brasses properly. Some poor devils hadn't had they'd been issued with bad brasses and couldn't get them clean and were forever on the verge of being charged. One or two of them were reduced to tears because they had bad brasses. Luckily, I had good brasses, and I managed to get mine in a good state. My boots were in a very shiny state after a while, after work with candles to smooth out the creases in the leather.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions there, Harry.
Yes.
The webbing, was it 37 pattern webbing, the stuff that had to be khaki?
Yes, it was. We had to do it a sort of a light khaki colour,
yes.
blanco it a light khaki colour. It was 37 pattern.
It was.
From wartime issue.
Yes.
As our uniforms, if you looked on the labels and the sizes, were all going back to the 40s. Everything we had was old stuff.
And the boots would be ammunition.
The boots were ammunition boots.
The studs.
With the studs and the yes.
The leather soles.
And the leather soles, yes. We had two pair of boots, one best boot, one normal, second best, but they both had to be kept in a fairly shiny condition. I remember one thing I was inordinately proud of at the time was the issue overcoat that I was given. And it was a little bit different from the others. It was of a very high quality, very warm, very soft, a slightly different colour than the other guys had. I was told later it was Canadian issue, but I was very pleased with that, and it kept me warm during that tough first winter. So the first 6 weeks went by in a very tough way, with drill, with a lot of work in the gym, with those demons in striped jerseys, screaming, "To the wall bars fly." We had a lot of that. And leaping over high, what do they call something horses?
Vaulting horses.
Vaulting horses. Yes. I was all right going over them sideways, but going over the lengthways, I always seemed to manage to horribly crutch myself right at the end. And then we had rifle shooting, which I think most of us passed. It's worth saying that those that, and it's an old army trick used by many drill instructors, I'm sure, throughout the armed forces, those that found it impossible to coordinate their arms and legs in the left-right marching situation, where when it came to an officer's inspection, were always hidden behind the NAFI and didn't take part in the parade. That happened. I know 3 guys who were hidden behind the NAFI on our passing out parade because they couldn't do the drill. But in the end, Worrell was magnificent during the 6 weeks. We also had tear gas training where we were issued with gas masks. We were put into an airtight or a closed wooden brick building, and the door was locked. We had our gas masks on as we entered, and then we were ordered to take them off to feel the effects of what it was like with tear gas and that sort of thing. Quite unpleasant, really. I recall, I think we've got hold of the corporal at the end and shoved him in at the end. He wasn't very pleased about that either.
And he wasn't wearing a mask?
No, he wasn't wearing a mask.
Good. I like that.
Yes. So the 6 weeks went by, we were getting more and more proficient. Our drill became absolutely brilliant. It was a form of what they call guards drill, with arms swinging up to the height of the shoulder, etc. A lot of stamping around. But we got it all together, and then the great day came where it was passing out day. The previous night we got our barrack room in superb order, with all our kit laid out. I recall we all slept on the floor because we didn't want to disturb the layout that we got. And then the following morning, we had the barrack room inspection, which we were told at the time that our squad, Coriano squad, had won against all the other training squads. And then we got on the square, we did our drill. I think we were carried onto the square by those lads who couldn't march properly and dusted down in case our boots cracked, the polish on our boots cracked. Before the marching started. So we had an inspection there. We did the marching drill very proudly to the sound of the regimental band playing My Boy Willie, the regimental march of the RTR. Very proud moment. And the Coriano squad won the drill as well, all thanks to the magnificent Sergeant Worrell. I recall we had a whip round afterwards and we bought him a lighter. I think it was a Ronson lighter, but he must have won. I think the rumour was he'd won every squad he'd ever trained, and he must have had a house full of lighters. But that was good old Sergeant Worrell, and we owed him a lot to turn us into the Zamblance of soldiers. So at the end of that, I think we got a 48-hour leave, and then began a 9-week course of driving and maintenance. So our first real close-up view of Centurion tanks and the tank park. We started our driving lessons, first of all, on 1,500 weight trucks driving the perimeter of Catterick Airfield. Just give us the feel of driving a vehicle.
Heavy vehicle.
And then we took the trucks that we'd got provisional licenses by then, and we drove through Darlington and Richmond and got in the way of double declutching and all that sort of stuff. These, of course, were before the days of automatic gearboxes. And then we started our serious training on Mark III Centurion tanks. I wasn't going to use the phrase off-putting. It's a bit trepidatious, all of us, seeing up close and then having to get into the driving seat of the tanks, making ourselves comfortable with the seat that used to go up and down, and with the tilting up and down and tilting, and going through the basics of the instruments, how to start the Centurion. It wasn't just a matter of pressing a button then and starting the main engine, which was the Merlin engine, which is the same engine that was on the Spitfire, with modifications during the war. And learning the instruments. The only instrument we had then on that particular mark of Centurion was a ref counter. There was a master switch, which you had to switch on before anything would happen. There was also the facility of what they call the aux gen, an auxiliary engine in the main engine compartment. I think it was a Morris 10 engine, something like that, which maybe on a cold morning where the main engine was reluctant to start, you could start the auxiliary generator, warm it up, and get enough charge to start the to assist the main engine to start. So first of all, they took us round into the moorlands on easy drives, or pretty flat easy drives, learning how to handle the sticks and how to handle the single gear stick, which rose in between your legs, with the then 5 forward gears and 2 reverse gears, high reverse and low reverse. It wasn't. Our instructor sat on one side of the open hatches each side, and if you made a mistake, he used to bat you on the head with his rolled up berry, which concentrated the mind wonderfully. So within quite a short space of time, we were reasonably competent. We could drive a tank, but we hadn't done any rough cross-country work or anything like that, and that came later. So in between further driving lessons in the Centurion, we also had a fairly intensive course of maintenance. A very important part of the training, that. And if you failed your maintenance, then you were back squatted and you had to start all over again. So eventually we came out at the other end with passes at various levels, A, B or C, for driving. I was classed as a good driver. C+ on maintenance. Don't know why. I thought I was pretty good at that, but it was a pass anyway. And basically that was that. That was the initial training finished. We were then put in I can't think of the word now, but a waiting posting situation, which lasted about a fortnight. I think they employed us, as usual, on fatigues to keep us busy. And then our postings came through, most of the chaps going to regiments in the Rhine Army. And the taller ones that had finished the course were picked out and sent down to the Household Cavalry because they were tall. I was posted with other friends of mine to the 5th Royal Tank Regiment, 7th Armoured Division, as it was a division then, Hohner Barracks, Bergen-Belsen in Germany, just at the side of the old concentration camp.
And what year was this, Harry?
The date of this was end of January, early February 1951.
Right.
So I had a week's embarkation leave, back up to Catterick. We got on, and within a couple of days we were on the train and down to Harwich. By this time, myself and several others had contracted very sore throats. We could hardly speak with the damp conditions at Catterick and wearing
scratchy shirts.
Scratchy and damp shirts, yes. No proper drying facilities then. And at the bottom of the gangplank, with all my kit, there was a military policeman taking our last 3 in our name. And I could barely croak out, as with my colleagues, and he pulled 3 or 4 of us out, and we finished to sent us to the military hospital at Harwich, where we had 3 days there with treatment and rest, looked after by national servicemen, members of the RAMC, most of whom, and I think all of whom, seem to be batting for the other side, if you'll excuse the euphemism. But we recovered, and then off we went again. A train journey across through Holland and Osnabrück and Hanover. Yeah. I think. We got off the train in Hanover. Trucks waiting for us, and trucked us to Horner Barracks. Horner Barracks was a former Panzer training school, beautifully built. The facilities there were infinitely more civilized than Catterick. We had 4 to a room, plenty of hot water in the ablutions. We had drying rooms. We had blancoing rooms. It was heaven. I think after the first week, while we had our badges on our uniform changed to 5th RTR, and the very much prized tanky badge on the left sleeve, we were taken out on a scheme, a 3-day scheme out on the heath, to give the instructor officer and his NCOs an idea of our competence, if you like. So it was an enjoyable 3 days. We got stuck a couple of times. I rammed the back of the tank in front at one stage, because when you stop a Centurion, the commander is supposed to say, prepare to halt, change down, slow down, change down. If you don't do that, you burn the brakes out immediately. And the guy in front, an inexperienced driver obviously, was told to halt, and he slammed the brakes on, and I didn't have a chance and hit the back of the other tank, buckled a few front mudguards, if you can call them that. But the NAFI truck came up at the same time, and a hot cup of sweet tea put me back into good fettle again. And at the end of that, the officer had us on parade and said, I propose to now read out my assessments of you. And my assessment, which I remember to this day, I was so proud of, was good driver. It was very near the Scout law of smiles and whistles under all the difficulties. It was something like that. Bears a good cheerful demeanour under somewhat trying circumstances. I think we had to. One tank got stuck at one stage, and we had to pull it out. So I was involved in that. So he then gave us our postings, and I must have been a reasonable operator because I was made the driver AFV on the 2IC's tank in our HQ troop. Mm-hmm. That tank, as you can imagine, was a gleaming specimen, shining like
just off the production line.
A snot on a wall, as they used to say, and all the nuts were painted red and white all the way. Yeah. The tank had never been out of the tank park. No. It was the 2IC's tank. So I reported to the corporal in charge. A lot of these guys were regulars who had been with the regiment during the war. Mm-hmm. They finished the war up in northern Germany near Hamm, yes. Not Hamburg, Hamm. Yeah. They were often referring to the previous colonel, a fellow called Colonel Leakey, who went on to become a major general, related to the Leakey family who found the early Neolithic remains in the Rift Valley in Kenya. Yep. I think he was the youngest one of them. He was a hero of the war. He'd got DSOs and bars and God knows what all. Books have been written about him. He'd even featured in some comic strips at a time during the war. But he had gone. He'd been promoted to brigadier, and our colonel then was a gentleman called Fitz Talbot, known by the other ranks as Flossie Tosspot. I hope he's dead now. I'm not listening to this. And he was a man of many moods. I think the first thing that sticks in my mind was the whole regiment was called out onto the square for... and in the meantime, we'd been taken for a tour of the old Belsen concentration camp, yeah, and obviously most of us had previously seen the pictures of this on the news at the cinemas, and dreadful. Some of the inhabitants of the displaced persons, there were still a few huts that had been left near the entrance to the camp, were still there. Couldn't know where to go. So that was a rather... and as people say, although it was a very sandy soil, highly wooded area, didn't seem to be much bird song around that camp. Whether it was, I don't know, just the thoughts of all the mass graves that we were taken to, and the general feeling, oh, what a hideous place it had been. Anyway, that was one of the first things that we did. And then there was a sudden call for the whole regiment to go on parade for an identification parade, as one of the women working in the camp, one of the German women working in the camp, claimed she'd been raped by a member of the regiment. So we had these women worked generally in the mess halls,
yes,
where we had to go in second best battle dress. You couldn't go in your overalls in a decent state, and we were served our meals in those days in Germany by these German ladies from the nearby villages. So she came round with the RSM, and you're always wondering if she's going to pick you out, even though you look guilty, even though you're busting a gut to look innocent. I can't recall them ever finding anybody. I remember thinking if she was an ugly girl, and she was one of those that she's probably so ugly she'd probably cured 6 peeping toms, in a time. Anyway, I didn't hear any more of that. And then the next thing, I think old Flossie decided, because the regiment had been accused of such a heinous crime, that we're all ghastly layabouts, and we'd all go on a 9-mile bash. So we had to parade in steel helmets, dungarees, belts and gaiters, and small pack order, with the small pack filled with, so it weighed a certain amount. And the whole regiment set off round the local villages, running, trotting 200 yards, marching 200 yards. Great delight of the German villagers, who were clapping and laughing and having a good time at our expense. Followed by regimental ambulances, because they knew what was going to happen. Those ambulances were full when we got back to camp. We were all in a bad way. And I was glad that I'd actually made it, but we were all in a poor state. So we went on several exercises then with the squadron, with the regiment as a whole, liaising with the Royal Horse Artillery, the very bright and shiny, the Royal Horse Artillery, with the Bishop or something, self-propelled guns. They had something like that. Abbott, self-propelled guns.
Did they have Abbots at that stage?
Well, it was they were like Abbott and Abbott anyway. Yeah. We also had a visit from the Black Watch during a scheme we were doing, who wrecked our naffy in a drunken, which they did everywhere they went. One strange thing, a brief glimpse of the Americans. One strange thing, which none of us got to the bottom of, was one part of the camp was sectioned off pretty severely with barbed wire, and in that were hundreds of soldiers dressed in battle dress, dyed navy blue, berets with a strange badge on, and Yugoslav shoulder flashes, armed with Lee Enfield 303 rifles. We were told not to approach them, not to go near them, don't have anything to do with them. I still don't know what they were or why they were there. But they were there. They were always desperate for Nescafe coffee, so we managed to get through to them one way or another and get good German marks for Nescafe coffee that our mothers had sent us from home. Yeah. I suppose I did several guards. The first time I'd actually worn a loaded pistol in overcoat order. It was still winter, demanding passes for all the German civilians coming into the camp, which they didn't like very much. We didn't get much chance. We used to go out to Hohner occasionally, out into the village of Bergen, and also if we had a free weekend, we'd go down to Celle, go to a pub there called the Blauw Schiff, the Blue Ship. There was always fights going on there. It was quite an exciting place to be at. Then
Sounds familiar.
Then I guess I'd been working on my tank was actually, she was called Enchantress, lovely name, and I made the mistake one day of deciding, and I'd signed for this tank. You know, you had to sign for the thing then. I'd signed for this tank and decided that it was time. It was taken out for a run. So I took it out for a run with the gunner and the wireless operator. I made the mistake of not asking permission for the corporal to take it out. When I came back from the heath, of course, it was covered in mud. And when the corporal saw it, he went absolutely ballistic. But I said, "But Corporal, I'm going to clean it." And he said, "Oh, you're going to clean it." But he was livid because I'd committed the most heinous crime of dirtying the 2IC's tank. And I was never really forgiven for that. Which I think resulted in my posting to Korea in the end. I think that had something to do with it. Get rid of him. He's dirtied the 2IC's tank. Anyway, cleaned the tank. And then, maybe about a month later, I was late off the tank park. I'd been working on the tank and doing something. Maybe the very strenuous job of changing a link, which was a hell of a job. It was a 2 or 3 man job, that changing a link on it with the giant spanner and the giant nuts.
Slacking the track.
Oh yeah, 4 inches was it in the middle down. Well, they'd allow you that. If you got any more than that, you get up.
Pull up the stick.
And once you'd got to the end of the screw for adjustment, then you had to start messing with links.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was late off and went into the barrack building where we were. I went into the room and said, "Oh, there you are." I think it was Joe said, "The RSM's just had us all out on the front and there's a draft from the regiment going to Korea. And you, amongst other, your name was on it, and that was the first thing I'd heard. I had thought at the time, or the papers would have you believe, that you could only, unless you were posted, you could only volunteer for Korea, but not so in the 5th RTR. No. So there were quite a lot of us from the regiment. I think maybe 40 of us, something like that. I thought it was a case of first in, last out, but there were some guys who had trained with us who were still there. And then it seemed to be that once they got up to a certain letter of the alphabet, then that was it. I mean, Jimmy Taylor, who trained with us, Bolton, never went. He stayed with the 5th RTR. So I said, MNOPQRS. After S, the rest could stay, and the others could go. So that was a bit of a shock. And anyway, that was it. We, I think about 2 or 3 weeks later, we were bused to Hanover on the train, taken to Bovington. A few days after that, we were given 7 days embarkation leave. My mother and father were convinced I'd volunteered, and I hadn't, but my father was an old soldier. He was convinced I'd volunteered. That's what it says in the paper, that's what it says on the news. They'd also, because at the time, when all hell was breaking loose at that particular time in Korea, the army were they had all kinds of schemes. Not only were they shipping battalions out there, but they were asking for a scheme where they had volunteers from, if you could volunteer for, was it 12 months, if you'd served, been a serving soldier. So there were quite a few of those at Bovington as well. And jumping forward a bit, when we got to Regiment over in Japan, in the 8th Hussars, were a lot of ex-reservists had been called up again, who'd gone right through the war. They'd signed on for 5 and 7, and of course the 7 wasn't up in 1950-51. So I must say, in the 8th Hussars, quite a high percentage of the guys were guys who'd gone right through the war, and married, settled down, families, jobs, and they've been called up again. Anyway, I'm running ahead of myself. So we were given all our at Bovington. After leave, we were given all our tropical kit, our jungle greens, as we had then, our new webbing, the green webbing, and it didn't take long. Maybe after another couple of weeks, we were shipped down to Southampton with many other troops. Infantry were joining, and all kind of artillery were joining, and then we were called the RAC draft from all regiments, and mainly from 7th Armoured Div in Germany. And maybe there were 50 of us. There wasn't a sergeant. There was a regular corporal, dear old Ronnie Brewer, later KIA, who was sort of in charge of us from the 10th Hussars. And we went down to Southampton and boarded a ship called the Empire Fowey, which is a ship that the British had requisitioned from the Germans after the war. It had been one of those German liners, the Nazi organisation called Strength Through Joy, where if you're a good member of the Nazi party and believed in the Führer, you might get a free cruise. Yes. On the SS, it was either the Bremerhaven or the Ludwigshafen, but we had renamed it the Empire Fowey when we'd taken it at the end of the war. So we got on board. All the RAC draft were in one section. It was quite civilised, this particular ship. We had bunks, two upper and lower, and dining areas away from where we slept. And that was basically the beginning of the great adventure. We sailed early one morning, no bands, no crowds. The only thing I last remember seeing as we pulled away from the dock was a tattered banner saying, "Nafi bids you farewell," and steamed off into the misty dawn, past the Needles, and then out to sea. You quickly got into the run of the ship. There were also married families on board as well, going out to Singapore and Hong Kong, etc. Colombo. So our first port, we had many ports of call. The voyage was to last 6 weeks. First port of call was Port Said, where a pal of mine from the 5th RTR, Dave Owen, who'd been in our training together, we'd not gone 10 yards beyond the dock gates before we'd both been fleeced of half a crown each by an Egyptian gully man, as they used to call him. He was making things disappear, and we were foolish enough to watch him make our half crowns disappear, which they did, and our half crowns disappeared, and so did he, in short order. So we were soon back on board. I can't remember much about Port Said. It was smelly, and a lot of smelly people. And then down to through the Red Sea, getting hotter and hotter, down to Aden. And it was so hot there I stayed most of that 24 hours we had saltwater showers, and I spent a lot of time to get cool under the saltwater showers. But by this time, they were letting us sleep on the foredeck at night, which was good. You could hardly get a place; everybody was sleeping on the foredeck. So and then on to Aden. After Aden, then to Colombo. Bit of shore leave there, and then from Colombo to. Just thinking I've missed any out. No, Colombo to Singapore.
Yeah.
Bit of shore leave there. Our activities on the ship were exercising, even drill. The infantry, from time to time, were testing their Bren guns over the back onto targets they threw into the wake of the ship. Yeah. They even had guard duty on the ship, where if it was your stag, you would go up onto a wing. It was quite spectacular, actually, to go up right out on the edge of the wing of the bridge with a pair of binoculars and act as a lookout. And I did that a couple of times as well. I enjoyed that. And then Hong Kong, quite different than it is now. And then the next port of call was Kure in Japan. So we disembarked at Kure. So looking at the Japanese dockers, who all seemed to be ex-Imperial Japanese Army, wondering if these were the men that had given our boys such a bad time in the POW camps. And Kure was called by the British I'll think of the initials in a minute. The JRBD, Japanese Rear Base Depot. Kure was the British JRBD, where everything for Korea emanated. Right. Except our camp wasn't in Kure, it was just up the road at a place called Hiro, which is a diminutive of Hiroshima, which is a bit further up the road. An old Japanese army camp, not that old, it was quite nice. Good structured buildings, barrack rooms, parade grounds, still with memorials to the Japanese army, chrysanthemums and Japanese names, etc. The flagpole. It was so busy, that camp, full of guys, reinforcements of all the arms of the army. They couldn't house us in the barrack rooms. We were in tents. So we were in tents for all of my first time in that camp. The name of the camp was Acanthus Camp at Hiro, just outside Kure. And then we had a parade where, again, we were told off of where we were being posted. Quite a few of the boys were posted direct to Regiment, which was 8th King's Royal Irish Hussars, and they went straight off to Korea. And then myself and maybe 20 more were 444 Forward Delivery Squadron, Royal Armoured Corps, whose base was at the Hero camp. There were tanks there. There was a tank park. Centurions, Cromwells, Comets, really? Few Comets. We always enjoyed the Comets because it was nippy compared with the Centurion. Nippy, very little, fast. Very fast. Really enjoyed that. You drive through, but I didn't like the little porthole that it had. Didn't like the bit too enclosed for me. Anyway, by the by. So for the first week or two, we were doing again drills under the auspices of a bucolic, grizzled old 8th Hussars WO2, who reports had been sent down the line for incompetence and the drink. So he was somewhat bitter. A World War II veteran, past his best. I think it was about, during the first week, one morning, everybody getting ready to go out on parade with our new webbing on. Nobody's had it on yet. getting it on. I was helping a couple of guys to put theirs on, and then by the time it was my turn to put mine on, they were on parade. So I appeared on parade late, and he immediately grabbed me, took my name, charge, and up before the CO or the squadron commander, I can't remember his name now, with dear old, I keep saying dear old, Corporal Ronnie Brewer, 10th Hussar, saying, "Do you want me to act as soldier's friend?" Do you recall this thing you could act when the guy wasn't really guilty of anything?
No.
He'd been being helpful to his comrades, and he had seen that, but he got out before he was on parade on time. And so he spoke up for me, went in front of the CO, spoke up for me, and what did I get? It was something and nothing. 48 hours confined to camp and a guard. So that was it. That was my end of my criminal career in the army. I never got caught ever again. Got caught, being the operative word. And then I guess we were then put to work preparing new tanks for shipment over to Korea, getting them ready in every respect. Sometimes it could be a dirty job because they used to fill, after the sea voyage for the tank, back in England, they'd fill the breech blocks and the gun with grease.
Everything was covered in grease.
Oh, God, it was bad enough in the hot weather because it was all over everywhere. You were having stripped to the waist and up the breech and all this business. Anyway, we did that and we got the things clean, boiling water and anyway, we got the tanks ready. I think there were 3 tanks ready to go, and myself and how many more? Maybe 9. There were about 10 of us, I think, on that. The first trip we did. We were issued with tank suits. I think there was any sleeping bags or blankets. We were issued with, I can never remember, was it 4 men 1 day packs of food? Or 3 men, I don't know. Anyway.
4 men in a tank would normally have a 10-man pack, which was
a 10-man pack. That's right. In a big cardboard box.
That's it. And it would last you two days.
Oh yeah, they were very good.
Yeah.
But, except whenever you open one, the fags were always missing, and the sweets and the chocolate was always missing. They were all dated 1943, 1944.
Okay.
So the Ordnance Boys had them long ago, maybe on the beaches of Normandy. But the Irish stew was still there,
yes.
and the rolls of bacon tinned, condensed milk tea, and powdered egg.
Yes.
It was all good stuff. And rich new Australian fruitcake in a tin.
Yeah, my wife used to love that. It's beautiful. It was lovely cake.
I know, lovely cake. but no fags, no. Anyway, and then one hilarious, in later years, seemed to me hilarious and still does. We went to the stores and collected some tank suits. We then went to the armoury and were issued with Webley revolvers and six rounds of 38 caliber ammunition, with the armourer sergeant saying, "I want to see that ammunition, but it's scarce, that ammunition." So they sent us to fight the Chinese army.
With 6 rounds.
But on no account must you fire them.
I had the same happen to me in Libya.
Yeah.
And in Cyprus.
Yeah, they're rare, those bullets.
You're right. Issued 6 bullets, and you're not allowed to put them in your pistol.
So, anyway, with the sort of the innocence of youth, we all took it in good part and thought it was a bit of a laugh. And then we went down to the docks. We drove the tanks down to the docks, onto the sort of hard, where an old American LST was waiting. Obviously been used in the Pacific, South Pacific during the war. They all had those LSTs. Drove the tanks on board, shackle them up, the doors closed, and we were off. The crew on that first voyage were a motley mixture of, they seemed like Greeks and French, and the cook was a homosexual. He spent the entire 4-day voyage chasing the second mate around the decks, calling after him in a high voice.
I feed you well, Johnny.
I know. So we were digging into our ration packs, and we slept on bunks. It was a smelly old tub, round the bottom, rolled a lot. The tanks, thank God, were shackled up with chains inside. And then we hove the hills of Korea, hove into sight, and this was because where the front line was, it was below the 38th parallel then, below the Imjin, not far north of Seoul. So we had to land in Busan, the southernmost port of Korea. We could smell Korea before we landed. There was a sort of mixture of wood smoke, human feces, boiled cabbage, garlic and chilies. That's how it seemed to me in later years. I wasn't able to analyse it so well at the time. So we drove the tanks off onto the hard, and we were met by a Royal Engineer officer. And he said, right, just park your tanks up here. In the morning, my men will come and will put you onto railway flats. Right, so can we... By this time, I think our rations were more or less gone. It was darkish, getting dark. I said, is there a cookhouse nearby? You know, we could get a meal. No, our cookhouse closed long ago. And walked off. Great stuff. Anyway, suddenly there was a big black American, and I said, is there any way, you know, we're hungry, is there any way, you know, you could find us some food? Come with me, boy. And he took us to an American cookhouse. And they were most generous, and it was absolutely wonderful. And it was the very first time I'd ever tasted southern fried chicken. Southern fried chicken, fries, ice cream, orange juice. Thank you. Thank you, America, for that. And that persisted right through my time in Korea. From the Americans were very good with us and gave us a lot of what we hadn't got. And then the following morning, the engineers turned up, and we had this very heart-stopping job of getting the tanks onto these railway flats, which were not wide enough, really. And they weren't quite hitting the platform either, so we had to... They were very good. The engineer NCOs were guiding us on, you know, with the hand movements. But we finished up on with maybe 6 to 8 inches of track protruding over each. Said, right, we asked for, are there any sleeping? No, you'll have to sleep under the tanks. We're talking about, we didn't know then, it was a 4-day, slow 4-day trip up the peninsula, up to the railhead near the line. Busan then was a heaving mass of refugees, horrible. Hundreds of thousands of them had come down during the first push by the North Koreans. And we had a hell of a job trying to, as we got onto the train and made ready to go, they were trying to get on to go back up north, you know, and they'd panicked to come down too far south, and the whole thing was a bit of a shambles. So we're sort of fighting them off in some cases. In fact, in the whole trip, the only people we did let on from time to time were ROK, Republic of Korea, ROK army officers who were trying to get back to their units. So we let them, and we also fed them as well where we could. And So we moved up through. The whole place was ruined. Everything was a ruined shambles, going up through former towns and cities like Tegu. Just a minute, I'll just get some notes I made at the time. Just going back a bit, we left England on the Empire Ferry on the 13th of July, 1951. From Busan, we went through Tegu, Daejeon, up to the outskirts of Seoul. That journey took us about 4 days. It was a coal-burning train, of course, and we were all black as pitch almost, with us sleeping under the tanks all the time. And at the railhead at Uijeongbu, a place called Uijeongbu, a party from the forward element of 444 were waiting for us to get the tanks off the train. Once again, it was dark, so they led us with torches from the back of their trucks, God knows where, up to their base, which was north of Yeongdongpo, a northern suburb of Seoul, at a ruined complex, which I found out later was an old prison called Pucheon Prison, but had been badly shelled in the previous year's fighting. So a lot of it was razed to the ground, although there were still some cells which were habitable and some administration buildings which were habitable. It had been a place where the prisoners were prisoners of the Japanese. Well, the Japanese only vacated Korea in 1945. Were weaving. They had weaving machinery. So we arrived there, it was dark, we parked up the tanks, and there were no beds for us, they hadn't made any. So we slept on the floor, and then we took our boots off and just slept. We did get some blankets by then, slept from the squadron, slept on the floor for that first couple of nights. And that first night, and I was awakened by a sort of a scuffling noise, and this was to be with us during all our time at the Pucheon prison. And I got a torch and flicked it on, wondering what it was, and there was a big rat pulling my boot across the floor, my leather boot across the floor. And that happened nearly every night, well, for the time we were there, until we moved up more towards the north. So as we got into the thing, we found there were, I guess, maybe about 40 guys. A lot of them ex-regulars, being called up again. Some were these special volunteers, ex-tankmen who'd volunteered for a year's or 18 months service. Again, a mixture of cat batches, but quite a lot of 8th Hussars. There was a CO, and I can't remember his name because he left. He left soon after I joined. There was a Lieutenant Haddon, RTR. He wasn't National Service; he was a regular officer. And they continued to get the tanks ready for frontline service, putting all the armament in place, the shells and everything, and getting everything ready, not testing the main armament, but testing the Beezer, making sure the Beezer was working all right. The radios, make sure the radios were fitted in and working all right, and the general maintenance and getting them ready to go, to take them up to the line. There were also, on that tank park, Cromwells and Comets, and A Churchill bridge layer.
No.
Yes. Churchill chassis on the bridge on top. I never saw it move. And in fact, when we left to move up, the Royal Engineers were going to. It was their thing, Royal Engineers.
Something for them to play with.
Yes. So it was quite a motley crew, and I don't think we weren't there too long. We spent Christmas there at Puchon prison. Yes, we arrived at the squadron from that train journey on the 5th of October, 51. Always surrounded by orphans. I mean, we weren't far off what they call the MSR, the main supply route, north-south, south-north. Refugees all the time, either coming from the north or going back, trying to get back up north. A lot of orphans with no parents dead. In fact, that Christmas we made. We invited we had nuns and orphans and gave them a party from our, what rations we had. We did get fresh bread. The truck used to come up with fresh bread. Our water was always in a water bowser, which was filled up every so often. And the cooking was done. We had a squadron cook, and the cooking was done on petrol burns. Other personnel at that location with us were, I can't call them a squadron, but maybe 2 troops of a Canadian unit called Lord Strath, the magnificent title of Lord Strathcona's Horse. And they had their own private sergeant's mess, with a sign outside saying Lord Strathcona's Horse Sergeant's Mess. We didn't have a lot to do with them, except when it came to winter clothing, when ours was late, of course, and we were borrowing from them superb winter clothes, wolfskin parkas, and the Americans. Next door to us were the US 1st Cavalry, so they helped us out a lot, and we helped them out a lot by... Not long before we arrived, there was an association, a women's association in America, a very powerful one, called the Daughters of the Revolution. And they'd passed an edict, got Congress to pass an edict that they weren't having their boys in the front line drinking hard liquor and beer, and they weren't going to have it. So the Americans, the 1st Cav, were rationed to, I think they got 1 tin of beer a week. Schlitz or some of that rubbish,
Yes.
64 burps to the bottle and all this business. That's all, no alcohol. But we could have, if we could get at it, as you know, the British soldier of any rank, if he can get the beer, then he can have beer. Senior NCOs can have whiskey with the officers, but the boys can have beer. So our people back at JRBD had made a deal with the Asahi Beer Company. You see it in the supermarkets now. To send us, to buy litre bottles of Asahi beer, which we could buy for 1 shilling and 6pence a litre. That would either come up with the NAFI wagon, which came up again maybe once every fortnight, 3 weeks, with little delicacies and beer and that sort of thing. But the Americans were desperate for beer, a strong drink, and I know it sounds awful, but they set the price. They were vying with each other to buy it. They were being very well paid, as you know, with nothing to spend it on. There were no shops or anything like that. So we were paying 1 6 a bottle for Asahi beer, and it wasn't illegal. We were doing them a favour. They were very pleased, and we were selling it to them. The price they set, $3 a bottle, And in those days, a dollar was 7 and 6pence in the 1950s. So we finished up with quite a lot of dollars over time, one way or another. I know I don't know, I'll come to it now. So, also at that particular, the CEO of he was a captain of Lord Strathcorner's horse, got involved in an unsavoury incident between himself, an American soldier, and a Korean prostitute. And one day there was an almighty shouting and fuss going on, and we rushed out from our cells, if you like, and found this officer lying at the back of the block, shot. And he'd been shot, it transpired he'd been shot by this, he'd been gone with this prostitute, and the American thought it was his girl, and he got his .45 out and blown him through the kidney. He did survive in the end. 4 weeks later, my pal David Owen said this guy he owes us £15 for whiskey or something. 2 bottles of whiskey, 3 bottles of whiskey, and he's not paid us. So we went down to the military hospital in Seoul. We had a squadron jeep. Went to this bloke lying there, suffering. He came back with a cheque, which didn't bounce. He did pay. Oh, well, we never saw him again. No. We never saw him again. It was all hushed up. Anyway, maybe not long after that, the line changed. The line moved north of the 38th parallel, moved into the hilly country beyond that, beyond the Injim River where all the fighting had been the previous day. The guy, Lieutenant Haddon, and and the captain, I can't remember the captain's name, RCR captain, disappeared, and a gentleman descended upon us called acting captain John Fenton, 5th LTR, hot foot from Germany. He'd volunteered to come out to Korea, and he'd arrived at the officers' mess of 5th Inniskillings. He was only a poor RTR officer, and you know those bloody snobs in those days. He had neither a private income nor had he any polo ponies. So they decided to get rid of him and make him the CEO of 4444 sort of. They were still asking for polo ponies in the 60s, I believe, to potential officers. Are you able to maintain 3 polo ponies? No? Well, off you go. Not suitable. Anyway, so I'm just trying to think, because he came, it was now December time, and the 5th DG were to arrive on the scene. The 8th Hussars were going, en masse. Even those lads who'd come out with us and been posted to regiment went back. They'd only served about 3 months in Korea, that's all. And we poor buggers were left. So, anyway, the placement of the tanks in the line were not on the brow of a hill. They were either behind the brow of the hill, hull down, and then dug in. And at the side was what they called, the boys had made what they called a hooch with wood and bits and that, where they could sleep and keep the weather out and whatnot, just at the side of the tank. And some of the forward tanks were just beyond the brow of the hill, also dug in as well. So they were difficult to move. They were tricky. They were pretty well dug into the side. They'd been the dugouts had been done with bulldozers, I think, way back. So they wanted it to move. So a party of us were asked to go up for how long? It wasn't long, only about 10 days, as an advance party to crew up the tanks, if you like, till, because the 50 Gs were coming in, and 8th Hussars were going back on the same ship that brought the 50G. So then, the 50G, we were up there. No, there was nothing happening. It was a quiet time. And it was then that Captain Fenton appeared. Jack, because his name was John. Jack Fenton appeared. Great big, smiling fellow, ex-Sandhurst, but a good man to have if you were out tiger hunting. You know, one of those. And he was our new CO, and he said, any of you want to go back up to regiment, you can. Those that don't can stay here. Some decided to go up to regiment, 50G. Mm-hmm. The colonel then was a fellow called Colonel Vigors.
That's it.
RD initials, Vigors. Mm-hmm. And then we moved up as well. We left this festering place at Pouchon behind and took all our tanks, what we had, and up north over the river. The engineers had built two beautiful bridges over the Imjim called Teal and Pintail. If the Americans had built a bridge over, or anything where the Americans had been, they would always leave a big roadside sign. You are crossing this point by courtesy of the 5,041st Construction Battalion of the U.S. Engineers. This job took 3 weeks and 4 days, and it was a hell of a time. And all this business, all in garish colours. So the engineers, when they'd finished putting up these fairly big, beautiful jobs, Teal and Pinto, not far away from each other, one for infantry and A vehicles, B vehicles, the other for armour. And the sign was, this is Pintail Bridge built by such and such company, British, such and such, assault company, Royal Engineers. It was no trouble. You know, nobody's put out, and it was easy, and thank you very much. It was something like that. The exact antithesis. An understatement, British understatement, as opposed to the American hyperbole. Yeah. So we moved up. We moved up north. The nearest village, we moved up the MSR. On the right, paddy fields, then a village called, maybe it's a town now, called Tok Chong. Just further north than that, there was infantry workshops. Then further up than that was the Norwegian MASH, the Norwegian field hospital, and then us. And we came off the MSR, went up a slope, and reached a plateau, and that was where our camp was going to be. The weather was bitter. Although there wasn't much, there was some snow, but not much. But everything was frozen. The ground was like bell metal. Difficulty with the tanks and all this business. You couldn't put your hand on the bare metal, your peril, it would stick. The regimental diary of 50G on the 5th of February 1951 all starts with the day's business starts with the weather. The wind chill factor on that day was -41. It was like the South Pole, similar to the South Pole, clear as a bell, everything frigid. You could, if you poured your tea out, it would be freezing before it hit the floor. I wouldn't say you peed, but it. That's exaggerating. But it felt, we couldn't shave. It was impossible to shave. We all had beards of one kind or another. Couldn't really wash, so we're all stinking a bit. And we're in tents, of course. There, putting these tents up, we couldn't get the pegs into the ground. I think the first night there at this new site, where we'd parked the tanks on the plateau, then decided where the radio tent was going to be and where Jack Fenton was going to be and where the other 2 tents were going to be for the boys. We couldn't get the tent up, so we had sleeping bags by then, and winter parkas and padded trousers, and the parkas had a hood with wire, so you could fit it to a shape. We'd all got a bit of frostbite by this time, still suffer from it occasionally when it gets cold here, with nose, ears and toes, because we were still wearing ordinary ammunition boots. Hopeless driving an unheated tank in that sort of temperature. So eventually we got the tents up, and sort of made a home where we were, the middle of nowhere. We always had Korean labourers, whether they were guys who'd been rejected by the army for whatever reason, or they were trying to avoid army. I think there's a lot of that in it. So they had to put wire up, wire up around the tank park, and because there was quite a lot of infiltration going on. You could be shot at from the hills from time to time. I'll come to that in a minute. What time is it? God, 3:30. It's coming to an end shortly, this. But one interesting thing that we found while we were at this camp was that in the previous year's fighting, I think it had been a defence point by the Americans. As I say, you walk from where our tents were, then you could go where a slit, like a trench, started, which went up like that, and then up, and there was a crest, and the trench was on the crest. Very good vantage point. You could see the main supply route, everything around. It was an American position because it was full of American. By this time, we collected all kinds of souvenir guns. There were a few 45 automatics knocking around. I had the short American carbine, also a Russian Dagcherev burp gun. Mm-hmm. Somebody else had one of these ancient rifles with a folding bayonet on the end, a Nagant, Russian, given to the Chinese and the North Koreans. Yeah. We even found, it was though the place had been overrun, because we even found a Russian steel helmet, which the North Koreans used to wear, in the dugout. It was still hard freezing by this, so we could see bits of ammunition boxes sticking out. Then there was a pair of felt boots sticking out of the side wall of the trench. And Chinese felt boots. I don't know whether it was Gus Faulkner or somebody started to pull them, and they came away and they were full of rotting feet. And then we dug eventually, and there was a body. Couldn't tell what nationality. He was in a khakis coloured overcoat. I don't know. We assumed he was an American, but I don't know. No identification. We reburied him. And there was all this ammunition. Later on, when the thaw started, we took, for those who had American arms like 45s or my carbine, it was a neat little rifle. There was plenty of that ammunition there as well. And then maybe Jack Fenton said this is probably dangerous. It's about time we sent for the engineer bomb people or something. So this sergeant and a couple of his buddies turned up, and he was walking down the entry trench, walking up to get to this escarpment trench. And I was by the radio tent, and boom! I heard. So all rushed out, and he was still on his feet, but all his foot had all this. We'd been treading on this all winter because it was frozen in. It hadn't activated.
So soft ground.
It was. So, he was conscious and very pale, resigned look on his face, and all his boot had gone and everything. Anyway, down with him to the Norwegian Mash. And then on another occasion, our squadron cook, was firing up his burners outside, he had a Korean assistant, and it was fed by petrol from with a 40 or 50 gallon drums.
It was a large
drum on the trestle.
Yeah.
By this time, it was quite warm, and we were more or less, all of us witness to this. We were waiting for a mug of tea or something, and the cook had said to this guy, "Open up the drum and and instead of loosening the air vent, the pressure at the top, he'd opened the main thing. So a jet of petrol came out, hit the flame that was on the cooker. Mm. It had splashed him all the way. So the next thing was he was up in flames, rolling on the floor. Corporal Hughes had the sense to rush into the nearest tent and get a blanket and roll him in it, but it was too late. So we drove. Hughes was holding him on the back of the jeep. I drove the jeep down to the Norwegian Mash, but he died later in the day. So that was a tragedy. And then just about that time, we'd been taking some tanks. By this time, I'd done another trip to Japan. Sorry I keep jumping around.
That's all right.
I did 3 trips during my time there altogether. And the middle trip was, we'd finished with Busan then, up to Incheon. Well, the Americans invaded the previous year to get the big Chinese retreat going. So another dreadful place. Landed at Incheon. Japanese crews this time. The Japanese at that time weren't allowed to have a merchant navy. So all these people, including the captain of the LSC, had all been in the navy, Japanese navy during the war. Interesting guys. And we landed at Incheon and then drove the tanks all the way, it's quite a way, back up to where Tokchung, to where the squadron was. Incidentally, the sign, as you came off the main supply route to come into the squadron lines, the sign there was 444 Forward Delivery Squadron with an RTR badge on it. I don't know who'd done that.
Somebody else.
Somebody else. So anyway.
That was the one with the tank.
That's right.
With a little woolly tank on it.
That's right. And then round about that time, I'd been up to Regiment with a tank, and I met Ronnie Brewer. Sorry, not Brewer. Ronnie Webber. And I said, "Are you coming?" We were due to come home, go down on the train down to Busan and get the troop ship back home. Yeah, we went. Are you coming with? No, he said, I have to do my time. The regiment's coming home at November, December time anyway. I have to do my time with the regiment. He was sort of fully integrated. And then, okay, Ronnie, see you soon. And then a week later, the news came down. He'd been killed. Poor Ronnie. And he'd been, at the side of the tank. There'd been some shelling. Pretty much off target at the time. And then there was one particular batch of salvo came in that wasn't off target. And Ronnie was diving under a tank, shouting to a New Zealander, a New Zealand trooper, whose name was Kiwi Cook, Trooper Kiwi Cook. You're safer under here. Too late, the shell came and went and caught them both and killed them both. So dear old Ronnie never made it back home. In later years, I spoke to his sister, who was trying to find out more about him, and he'd said to his sister, "I have a feeling I'm not going to come home." She had a letter from him saying that. Anyway, this was sort of coming to the end. Another an amusing incident was we'd taken tanks up to Regiment with acting captain John Fenton. We were coming back in the squadron jeep. And we were passing the first cavalry lines. And there was a couple of jeeps blocking the way with American military policemen there, holding up an American officer to an American major, drunk to the wide. He'd done his time, he was going home, and he'd been celebrating. So he was absolutely legless. And then he saw us waiting to get past their jeeps, and then, he made a beeline for Jack Fenton and said, with his beret on them, "That's the cutest little hat I ever did see. I'm gonna." And they were Jack Fenton and this major were fighting. Jack trying to stop him snatching the beret off his head. The police and the Americans trying to drag him off. "I'm sorry, sirs." Sirs. They thought we were all officers because we had our silver badges on. Right. "I'm sorry, sirs, he's drunk." And when he's bloody drunk. He's going home. And so he didn't get his beret. As Jack Fenton used, typical of our country cousins, the Americans.
Yes. Yeah, quite.
So, then it became time to... come home, and it was quite poignant, really, that... in the meantime, with courtesy of the 1st Cavalry, we went to... They said, "Would you like to come to there's a concert further down at Weijongbu. Some Hollywood stars are coming. Would you like to come?" I said, "Yes."
Bob
so
Hope?
Not all of us, not Bob Hope. no. He did come.
Some hope.
He did some hope. He did come actually, but I never saw him. It was. And this is for history, folks. 1st Cavalry trucked us down to the venue. Thousands and thousands of American troops there. I think we were the only British. And in fact, there were some American nurses there. They saw our berets. They thought we were French. "Hey, French! Hi, French! How are you?" But we didn't we didn't disabuse them.
Bunch of onion sellers.
And anyway, it was... The compere was a guy who became part of a junior member of the Sinatra Rat Pack, a guy called Joey Bishop.
Yes.
You remember the name?
Yeah, I know.
And there were girl dancers doing dancing and this, that, singing. And then the 2 stars were Piper Laurie and Julie Adams. Piper Laurie was well known. Julie Adams, not quite as well known, and they did little songs, and Piper Laurie they were doing a suggestive song about, "I have a little pet pig, and I take my little pig at home, and he snuggles up to me every night in bed. Would you like to be my little pig?" Of course, everybody, all these sex-crazed Americans went bloody mad. This is all going down, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed.
Yeah, but it's true.
It's true.
It happened.
Of course. These things do.
These, I guess it was almost the last day of my time, and the long 4-day, because basically we'd all been living like pigs and eating like pigs, and it was a hellish place, really. And it was quite poignant, really. During that last day, somebody would come up. I remember him saying, "Oh, I've got Harry, would you like my beret? I've got it. It's a new one. I haven't worn it, but I've shrunk it to the right, tanky sort of shape. Will you take it home with you?" And this, that, and the other. Or, "Oh, I've written a letter to my wife or girlfriend. Well, post it in England when you go, so I know that it's going to get to her," and all this. This went on sort of all day, so it became quite poignant. And then the following day, saying goodbye to everybody, myself and maybe half a dozen more, we'd all come out at the same time, got in the back of this 3-tonner to take us to the railhead at Weijongbu. And as we drove down the track we see the boys all waving. In a way, I didn't want to go. That was my life. That was.
It gets under your skin, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was the way.
The place
Yeah,
is.
it was. That was how it was been and how it was going to be, and I had that feeling, and then got on the train with a lot of others, all going home. down to Busan, into a tented camp at Busan. We went to the UN cemetery there, which was fairly full, Americans, and a lot of Turks as well. The Turks were noted for the high casualty rate. They were the boys for going in with the bayonet, they were frontal attacks and all this business. So they suffered the most. In fact, the Americans used to take newly arrived American soldiers to show them the aftermath of a Turkish attack. So this is what you should be doing, get in there. So, and then we found Ronnie's grave. Then there were I don't know what it's like now. I suppose it's been done properly. There's just wooden crosses and a mound of earth, and it said Corporal. And they put his name on wrong. They got his name wrong. Corporal Ronald Brewster. His name was Brewer. So right, straight up to the American officer in charge of that, and proved to him he wasn't having it at first. And I said, his name isn't Brewster, it's Brewer, and wrote it down. They did change it because his sister had got a photograph of when they made the graveyard more ordered. They got it right. So and then after a few days, we got on an old tub called the Empire Pride, and hammocks over mess tables below the waterline. It was horrible. It was an old rust bucket, it was. Anyway, thank God. By the time we got to Singapore, we changed ships. They never said why, they just said, right, we're changing ships, and we moved on to the troopship Devonshire, which brought us home. And we steamed into Liverpool, not Southampton. We came, and there was a band, and my mother and father, and Daphne, who had been writing to. We weren't engaged or anything. She was there, and then they shipped us straight away. I mean, they owed me weeks and weeks of leave, but shipped us straight down to Bovington, and I had about 20 minutes with my mum, dad, and Daphne. Straight down to Bovington, and I was carrying a personal letter from Jack Fenton. He said, "Tip this to the nearest RTR officer you can find." Because there had been rumours saying they're using the lads coming back from Korea or waiting to be demobbed. They're using them for cookhouse duties and 24-hour guards and all kinds of rubbish. So I found an officer and gave him this stained letter telling him where it was from. So he just nodded and I went away. And then shortly after that, although there was an attempt for them to put us on guard, and I think there was almost a mutiny, we came home we had 7 days leave, then back to Bovington for demob, if you like. So we're handing kit in, all our tropical kit and this, that, and the other. On the ship, they'd given us a brand new army V-neck khaki pullover because it was coming winter, and we hadn't worn them; they were brand new. So a sergeant came in. Oh, good! A sergeant came in, one of these old grizzled sergeants. He'd been in the army all his life. He'd never been out of Bovington. No, two medal, 39, 45 star on the Victory Medal. Right, lads, those pullovers, right, hand them in. When? To the store? No, hand them in to me. So, all right, and took all the pullovers away. And the following day, another sergeant came in and said, right, your pullovers, hand them in. So, well, we handed them in yesterday. Well, I've not had them. They should have been given to me. Right, you're all fined £1 each. So one was selling them to some fence in Poole or something like
Yep,
that,
yep.
and the other sergeant was his mate was taking the quid.
Yeah.
So that was my last. I thought, well, bloody hell, that's the army. And then we had a final parade the day after we left for good, and I don't know. I don't think it was an RTR brigadier or something, or some sort of cavalry brigadier. Took the parade, came down the line, saw my medal ribbons. Oh, Korea, it's good. Did you enjoy it? I said, well, not all of it, sir. No. Are you thinking of staying in the army? No, sir. No.
They just don't get it, do they?
Got on the train at Wool Station and buggered off. And then we had to go straight to Manchester to sign up with, before going home.
Yeah.
I signed up with, in fact,
The TA.
There it
Sign
is.
up on the reserves.
Knowles H, Duke of Lancaster's Yeomanry, Lancaster House, Whalley Road, Whalley Range, Manchester. Driver AFV, and then it says something about when I can't even. Military conduct very good, not exemplary.
No.
Very good.
Just very good.
Must have been that late on parade or dirtying the 2IC's tank.
Probably.
Is this still on?
Yeah. They've held it against you all these years, Harry.
This man has performed his duties in a satisfactory manner. He is honest and trustworthy.
Well, I never.
So there you are.
There you go.
And we were late, although thanks, love. I joined the army on the 22nd of September, did I say, 1950,
Yeah.
when I arrived at Catterick. I didn't get out until the 5th of October. Late!
You're late. They kept you in extra.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
So that was it, and that was it, and I lived happily ever after.
Wow. Thank you.
I've not said anything about the Duke of Lancaster's Yeomanry.
Not to worry.
But we were a Wrecker regiment. We had Dingo armoured cars. From time to time we had Daimler armoured cars with a 2-pounder gun. And from other times we had, if anybody can remember these, tank destroyers called charioteers with a 20-pounder gun and an open turret.
Yes. Yeah.
And our schemes used to take, our fortnight camp took place variously at several times, Salisbury Plain on exercise, up in Kirkcudbrightshire on the gunnery ranges up there,
Yep.
also occasionally down at Thetford to do gunnery and schemes
Norfolk,
down there
yep.
in Norfolk.
Yeah.
And we had then the pleasure of one of our junior officers being Lieutenant David Waddington, who became Home Secretary, Governor of the Bahamas, and then, as of now, a member of the House of Lords as Lord Waddington. I met him at the Barbican just before I retired at an exhibition for the police. We were doing police uniforms and trousers and pullovers, and reminded him of the halcyon nights and the officers' night in the sergeant's mess and sergeant's night in the officers' mess. He had the grace not to blush. He's the untidiest officer in the regiment who used to appear on a fortnight's camp on parade in plimsolls, grey flannel trousers and a battle dress blouse.
He'll enjoy hearing all that again.
I've got his photograph somewhere. Talking to him, having a bit of laugh. Have you switched it off?
Have you had it? That's it?
There's one little song that the 29 Brigade, of which we were part in Korea, before it became expanded to the Commonwealth Division. When I arrived in Korea, the 29 Brigade was commanded by an Irishman called Brigadier Tom Brodie, and then when it expanded into a division by Brigadier General Coad, C-O-A-D. And the 29 Brigade boys used to sing to the tune of a popular song of the time, which was called Hurry On Down. To the tune of Hurry On Down, they would sing, Hurry on down to the front line, Brodie. There's nobody here but us Yanks. Hurry on down to the front line, Brodie. Bring your Centurion tanks. Oh, the Chinese are here, but they think they're here to stay. But bring the brigade and we'll chase them away. So hurry on down to the front line, Brodie. There's nobody here but us Yanks.
And I think we'll end at that point.
I think we'll end at that.
Right. Thank you very much, Harry.
Okay, my pleasure.
I'm gonna enjoy putting a transcript together on this one.
Oh, dear, oh dear.
Thanks again.
Okay, it's my pleasure. God, I'd no idea I could remember all that. It kept coming to me as I went along.